Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 18, the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that a person who would like to view and participate in the meeting while in progress may do so by visiting the agenda on the town website, where you will find information to call in. A record of this meeting shall be posted to continue our regular practice of doing so. With that said, I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, April 21st meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission. And as always, we'll start with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
I'm Jeff Bryan.
William Payne.
Kip McNamara.
Lori just joined as well. I'm not sure if her audio is working. Lori Stevenson has joined us from the commission, and myself, Rebecca Longbaugh.
Perfect. All right. So first up this evening, the Bolton Conservation Commission will now open a public hearing for a notice of intent filed under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, regarding the work on a single-family home and driveway located on Long Hill Road. Parcel number, is it 40?
So it's 4D60.
4D.60.
Yep. If you would bear with me for a moment, I will unmute the applicant and their representative. Very quickly, for those participating from home, if you could use the raise hand function in the chat, that is how you will be able to raise your hand if you have a comment. And please wait until you're acknowledged either by myself or the chair. So we're going to allow for the applicant to, or the representative, to summarize their proposed project, summarize and express where the resource areas are and the extent of their project, any proposed mitigation. And then if the chair so wishes, he will then ask for the commission to comment. Once the commission's provided their comment and the chair wishes to open it to the public for comment, at that point, use the raise hand function and we will address those one by one. So I see we have Bruce Slater and Neil Gorman from David E. Ross Associates, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Okay. So currently this is the parcel, which is 4D60 as previously described, and I'm now just going to change to the project area. So Neil and Bruce, if someone wants to summarize, that would be excellent.
Yeah, I will go ahead and summarize for the project. Again, I'm Neil Gorman from David E. Ross Associates, and I'm the project manager for this specific project for Bruce Slater. And as you saw in the previous image, this is a 27-acre piece of land that extends. It has frontage on Long Hill Road, Main Street, as well as Meadow Road. And a large portion of the property is within the floodplain and the riverfront area of Great Brook. And this particular project, we're proposing just the construction of a single family home off of the frontage from Long Hill Road. And as you can see down the bottom of the page is Long Hill Road. The property then slopes downward from Long Hill Road to two ponds, one on the left and one on the right at the bottom of the slope. This was an active gravel pit for many years, and those ponds ended up getting created through that, which at a later time were used for trout farming. So neither the trout farming or the gravel pit are active anymore. It's still, so we've delineated the wetland side of the pond, well, the pond sides closest to where the proposed construction activity is. There's an existing gravel driveway leading from the bottom left corner of Long Hill Road down the slope and then between the two ponds into where the gravel pit was active at one point. So on the plan there, you'll see that the buffer zone shown, the 25-foot no disturb zone, the 50-foot buffer zone, and then the 100-foot or the 75 adjacent resource buffer zone. And between the 100-foot buffer zone and the road is where the proposed sewage disposal system is located. It's a couple leaching trenches. The soil testing was performed in that area. It's being that an old gravel yard was all sand and gravel. We couldn't dig deep enough. So the sewage disposal system to meet the Board of Health requirements needs to be 100 feet away from the wetlands. So that's the one location, as you can see on this property, that meets all the criteria for the Board of Health, which also includes an offset from the front property line, which is that stone wall that you see between the sewage disposal system and the road. So then the next thing was to try to figure out where the, optimal position to put the dwelling, the single family dwelling. And we more or less placed that towards the toe of the slope to the right of the existing driveway, trying to meet the, to maximize our offsets from the wetlands as much as possible. And the way it's oriented there, just a standard 4-bedroom house, and then with a garage off the backside or the pond side. Given the steep slopes and the sandy soils, it will require kind of a taller foundation than normal. It'll be more like a 10-foot pour versus an 8. And then it will step down to where the garage floor is well. So as we come down the driveway and we turn into the garage, we have our septic tank, that's the ST, and the pump chamber located within the driveway. Again, to meet the Board of Health requirements, we need to be 50 feet away with our tanks from the wetlands. So that meets that criteria. And then further down in between the ponds is a proposed well location. Again, that was chosen trying to fit, to be offset 50 feet from the tanks and 100 feet from the leaching field. That was the location that really is the best fit scenario for this particular site. Just to the left of the well, we have a temporary slurry pit proposed for the tillings coming out of the well, given that it's so close to the wetlands. And there's a detail on the plan spelling out how that should be constructed. But it's basically digging out a depression, like a 10 by 5 depression, surround it with silt bales, so when the well is drilled, the tillings will go into there. And it's just a temporary thing for the drilling of the well. The other parts of the plan is the existing gravel driveway that's still going down there. We know that, the owner would still like to have access out to the back there for other purposes, but we're proposing, because that's so close to the pond, a stone recharge trench along the edge of that gravel driveway. A portion of that is in the no-touch zone, but the driveway is as well. So we're just trying to mitigate as best we can in that situation by putting in a stone recharge trench on the left side of the driveway. As for other mitigation efforts, we do have some plantings proposed between the house and the well in the driveway down in that corner. Some new plantings in that area, shrubs and trees. We're also proposing numerous perennials and shrubs along the 3-to-1 slope between the leaching trenches and the driveway. And then off to the right side of the house, we also have proposed some other plantings, small trees and some shrubs between the house and the wetlands. In all, there's about 15,000 square feet of disturbance within the 100-foot buffer zone. And the proposed house foundation, the nearest offset to the wetlands is 38 feet. The well is offset 31 feet. And there is a proposed deck on the right side of the house that's currently proposed to be 30 feet from the wetlands. As I mentioned already, there was some plantings already proposed for mitigation. And given the site with the slopes and, being previously kind of a previously occupied and disturbed area, this is really a best fit scenario for our client, who also owns a business right on Main Street that abuts this property, and would like to personally move here and be close to the restaurant, but not have to live right above it. The other mitigation efforts we have proposed some roof drip recharge trenches along the foundation, along the front of the foundation and around the back of the garage to collect any roof runoff and get that back into the ground and recharged, and not just rutting away towards the nearby ponds. We looked to see if there was another location for the house that would meet all the offsets from septic and the ponds, but there really isn't a location once we apply the zoning as well, which we have to be 50 feet off the front property line. And we're not much more than that right now. So moving it to the left of the driveway or further to the right would just be probably closer to the wetland and not meet the zoning offset and be closer to the road. So again, it is a tight fit, but on all 27 acres, we're disturbing probably a half an acre. And there really isn't any other development opportunities on the property with frontage on other roads due to the stream and the floodplain. So although it looks like we're doing a lot, in essence, on the 27 acres, we're doing not very much at all. So I guess with that, I'll turn it back to the chair and the commission.
Sure, thank you. Well, I'll open up to questions. So you had already kind of mentioned you can't put the garage on the left. As I'm looking at the picture, the left of the house. I was looking to, can it go to the left or the right of the house? Just trying to figure out why that wasn't there. And also it says 4-bedroom house. Usually if we're gonna try to squeeze something in here, usually we'll say, can you go with the 3-bedroom house, a smaller septic, and pull stuff out that way? I guess those are my initial 2 questions.
Okay. Well, the difference between a 3 and a 4-bedroom septic, the leach field, it will be a little bit smaller. That's already outside the buffer zone and wouldn't really change anything regarding the rest of the layout of the site. The tanks would be the same size for a 3-bedroom versus a 4-bedroom. The location of the garage, the owner has come up with a couple other concepts that may be able to move that garage up closer to the house. But, he hasn't finalized that yet, but a different layout of the house may be an option.
I think the point Brian was trying to make, just to clarify, regarding minimizing the bedrooms within the home to the 3-bedroom would be, although the septic itself is outside of the resource area, minimizing the space that's utilized would allow you to pull the structure of the single-family home and associated adjacent structures, whether it be the garage or the deck, further outside of the resource area. So I believe that's the point he was trying to make, and to inquire whether or not that was considered, or if an alternative analysis was drawn up to show the garage shifted further outside the resource area, being within the 50, it's within the 100. And if the septic's smaller, can you then pull that whole single-family home structure with the garage into the 100, thus pulling that wellhead out of the 25, or adjacent to that 25-foot no disturb? Does that clarify, Brian?
It does. It was actually well said, much better said than those are like some of my initial things. And just looking at this, I'll open up to the rest of the commission and it's kind of what I'd like to get out on the site. But one of my big concerns too is looking at exactly where the well is, and again that recharge trench that's right within the 25-foot no touch. Generally, like we do nothing in the no touch, and it strikes me looking at it quickly that the driveway can be moved or altered, but it's hard. I can't picture the site exactly in my head, but that's just some initial impressions I get. And yes, Rebecca, that did clarify what I was thinking with usually if we find a smaller septic, a smaller house, we can start pulling everything a little bit further out of the buffer zone.
And so, Brian, it also sounds like you may want to visit the site.
I would. And I would be curious to what others have to say. Sometimes I can picture the site. I can't picture this one exactly. I just know it seems, especially with the pond and the river, that it's something we should be careful with.
I agree. It helps when we take a look at the site.
I would agree with that too.
Neil? Do you
Yeah.
have any- Okay.
All right, I just want to comment on why the garage was placed where it is. It's hard to see the underlying topography with so many proposed lines on top.
Let me
When you
see.
see it on the site, it tends to flatten out right down in that location. So ideally, rather than trying to cut into the hillside more to try to turn a car in for the garage, it was just a tighter fit. But where it kind of, the way it's set up down there, that the topography tends to flatten out somewhat down in that where the garage is located. But we can certainly look at it during the site walk. And then again, moving the house more forward towards the road again is pulling it away from that flatter spot down the bottom where we just have a little bit better control of, you know, setting up the foundation walls with the existing steep slope. I can't see real closely, but what is my current offset from the front property line on my plan there for the foundation to the front line?
One moment. My computer is being a little strange, so.
Yeah, I know. It's
So you
delayed
were-
reaction.
You're talking about the septic or the
No,
home?
the septic can't move any further to the road because it's pretty much, they only have a couple feet of,
Yeah, so
but
you,
59
foot.
feet and 50, so.
Yeah.
And we have to be 20 feet from the leaching trenches. So again, there's a little wiggle room, but there's not a lot. And again, as you see down where the septic tanks are, the grayer lines are a little bit flatter in that area, or show a little flatter topography in that specific spot.
so what I'm seeing from this anyways, is you'd potentially be able to move the proposed four bedroom home about 9 feet, right? So if you have the 50-foot minimum offset, so you're still meeting that, and you have about a 9 feet of wiggle room to the offset from Long Hill Road. And then the garage itself, you have some ability to manipulate the way that is placed next to the single family home, whether it's next to it or shifting things over. My other question is, is this all staked out on site? And if not, could you possibly do so?
It is not staked out at the moment, no. Depending on how soon the site walk is, we can get something on the ground out there, yes.
Sure. So it sounds like all the commission would definitely like to carry out a site visit. How we have addressed this in our last public hearing item was
Can I ask
when-
first?
Go ahead, Brian. Yep.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but is there? Can we ask? Is there anybody waiting to ask any questions from the public on this before we try to schedule a site walk?
Yeah. You can use your raise hand function if you have comments to make, if you are in a butter or an individual from the public.
Okay. So barring that, any other commission members that have initial questions or thoughts? Okay. All right. So then, Rebecca, sorry to cut you off. If you
No.
want to continue on our lovely site visit policy or how we've tried to arrange it in the past, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So previously, how we're handling it during the stay-at-home order and the quarantine, if commission members feel they are comfortable and safe looking at a site, we ask that the applicant is not present or they are present from afar, more than 6 feet. I would encourage commission members to wear a mask while they're on site visits, just in the event that they are coming in close proximity to potentially the applicant or the representative or another commission member. We are not encouraging more than 2 commission members to be out on site at one time. So all things can, and then of course, obviously following CDC guidelines and suggestions from the governor on how to maintain safe practices while we're still trying to hold business as usual and carry out business as usual. So with all of that being said, it's typical to have the property staked out. So that's something we would ask again, but most importantly during this time, to have the property staked out. That means the location of any proposed structures, including recharge areas, the 4 corners of the septic area, extent of grading, the structure of this 4-bedroom home with the garage, with the stairs, the boxes, the well location. Same thing with potentially the edge of driveway. Anything you think on site the commission needs to see, I would encourage you to stake it out and label it as such. You can send me a key after you stake it out if you're just using acronyms to do it. Otherwise, you leave us at our wits, which is fine, to figure it all out on site. We would request that the applicant or its representative, if they're amendable to the commission carrying out a site visit, that you let us know if there's a certain time of day or a certain day of the week that you do not want individuals out on your property, or if you simply have a policy of stop by once it's staked and flagged. So I will leave that open to the applicant and their representative. I don't know if Neil or Bruce want to chime in. Yep, Neil.
Yeah, I just, that's understandable for me. So just let me know when, or I can check tomorrow with our surveyors when we can get things laid out, and I can report back to you when that should be done. So the members then can coordinate when they can go out there.
That would be absolutely perfect, because once it's staked out, then I can poll the commission, see when they're available. Or if the applicant just lets us know if they do have a policy of, once Neil confirms that it's staked, please let me know when people are going to be out there, but it's, at your free will, basically, in terms of scheduling. But we would definitely let the applicant know when the commission members were planning to be on site. But if you could just send me an email or notify me of when it is staked,
Sure.
And after your surveyors have confirmed that, that will allow us to continue the process.
Okay, I can do that. And I don't know if Bruce is still on there, if he wants to add in anything.
No, can you hear me?
Yes, Bruce. Yep,
Oh,
I muted you.
what I was supposed to hit when I talk, I didn't hear that.
That's okay.
Just didn't know if you wanted to add anything, Bruce, or.
No, that's fine. And Neil, I think we're going to probably definitely be changing that the proposed house to the 20 by 7 that I had showed you,
Okay.
which would eliminate the proposed garage. So basically, it would the structure would be, I think that's 30 by 50. Structure would be another 20 feet over to the left, or a little bit. We can't go to the right anymore, but it would be over to the left. We'll see if we can, I'll show you that when I meet with you as soon as we can. And
Okay.
yeah, that garage is going to be the garage is going to be eliminated.
Okay.
I mean, I didn't know what you could hear. I couldn't understand what button I was supposed to push, but the raise my hand thing. I'm sorry, it's the first time I've ever done this. So
That's okay.
I apologize for us.
We're all learning too.
That's fine.
Yep.
Typically, the applicant and the representative associated with the application will be unmuted during their public hearing time.
Okay.
And then you can speak as we're the commission summarizing and answers or
Okay.
ask questions. The other question I had was, you mentioned that this used to be an active trout.
Yeah, my dad built the ponds, I want to say he started around 1965, 66, and finished probably in the late 70s.
Okay.
He used to have, used to stock it with hundreds and hundreds of trout, rainbows, brookies, golden trout, tiger trout, and he used to charge, it was $1.50 to get in, and then it was 20 cents an inch for the fish. So he
Yeah.
did that for a long time, and then the story is, years later, that there are a lot of dishonest fishermen, but they used to sneak in at night, and he kept pretty good records,
Yeah.
so he could-
Well, so the reason why I bring it up, and my question was about the gravel pit as well, if you have the date or the last date of when that was active, if you could just provide that to me, that would be great.
Yeah, approximately, yeah.
That would be cool.
And I know, Rebecca, if I may, you had mentioned if I knew how far away the 200-foot offset from the brook was, and
Yes.
that's out of the plan view here, so we're not within any riverfront areas, but our revised plan will show that.
Okay, that would be great. Just so that even if it shows it,
It'll show it in the on the plan view on sheet 1. It'll show on there.
yeah, just so I can get a better understanding of your site, so your proposed site location.
Yep.
And then you have the floodplain. I'd like to see that riverfront area on there as well.
Okay.
Even if it doesn't carry over to the close up project area, this
Yep.
one, it's still good to include that just to show.
Yeah, I'll show it for
site.
relevance. The other thing is before your next meeting, based on, I'm guessing we'll be continuing this, obviously, is what would be the deadline for submittal of revised documents for that meeting?
The Thursday noon on the Thursday prior to the next meeting. So it would be Thursday, the April 30th at noon.
Okay,
Which is also in our bylaws if you need to reference
Okay.
that as well.
excellent.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, any outstanding questions right now, or are we looking to possibly continue and schedule a site visit?
I think the
Okay.
representative just suggested a continuance, so.
We'll
Yeah.
be willing to request a continuation to your next meeting.
Okay, and just Rebecca, that's May 5th, correct, is our
May
next meeting?
5th, and the next meeting public hearing time will be 7:15.
7:15, perfect.
Yep.
All right. In that case, I would like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for Long Hill Road, Lot 4D-60, until our next public meeting, Tuesday, May 5th at 7:15 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And a roll
So
call.
continued. Yeah, we'll do the roll call again. So Jeff,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I'm an aye myself.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you, Bruce and Neil. We will see you hopefully on a site visit, or we will be on site prior to the next meeting. If not, we will see you on May 5th.
Excellent. I'll send you some information. Thank you.
Perfect,
Thanks,
thank
Jess.
you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for your doing
Take
this.
care.
Take care.
Now we have Chris Post.
And we're ready to move. You're ready for next one?
Yes.
All right. The Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue a request for determination of applicability under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, regarding the work on a single-family home driveway located at 787 Main Street.
We did not receive any comments back from DEP, even though this was an RDA because of the close proximity to the resource areas. I just want to be sure they had no questions regarding stormwater, and they said they didn't have any immediate concerns.
Were there any outstanding questions we had on this? I know we were waiting to hear back from DEP. We're waiting for the file number.
So there is no file number because
it's
it's
an
an
RDA.
RDA.
I'm sorry, yep.
But we still did, so I did misspeak on waiting on the file number, but we did still want, I still wanted input from DEP, but they, like I said, they had no immediate concerns. It looked like it was benefiting versus negatively impacting. So I don't know if the commission had any outstanding questions or concerns.
I didn't offhand. This is one that sadly I was not out on the site visit. So I will happily go with whatever others felt they saw.
So this is Bill, and I went there, and I have no problems with it.
And so did I. I had no problems with what they're doing either.
I was there as well.
Is there anybody waiting in the audience? Any hands raised to discuss this from the public?
Let's see. I see none.
All right. In that case, we already closed this? No. All right. In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we close the request for determination of applicability for 787 Main Street.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, and I guess we'll go roll call. So Jeff Bryant.
Oh, Jeff, you're muted. I got it.
Aye.
Hello.
All right.
Hard to be muted. Every once in a while I have to be.
It's a good thing. Okay, so this was the roll call vote to close the public hearing for the request for determination of applicability. I have Jeff Bryant as an aye. Bill Payne.
Aye.
All right, Kip McNamara
Aye.
and Lori Stevenson.
Aye.
All right, and I'm an aye as well to close. Rebecca, thoughts on the best RDA number for this?
If you want to issue with conditions, you would issue a -3.
Yep.
If you want to issue because there's an exemption, which for this, I don't know if there is, but that would be a -5. A -6 would be that it's within jurisdictional area, but it's only jurisdictional under the local bylaw. So I think those are the three that you're deciding between.
Did we have any condition? We didn't really discuss any conditions to add. None that I'm remembering offhand.
No. Typically, we just talk about erosion control, which they have a proposed siltation barrier. So I would suggest to the commission that we just memorialize that in the conditions as well, but also state that there should be an extra stockpiled on site in the event that's a typical condition. Additionally, there should be a condition on the success of the plantings. They have a proposed wet mix specified by New England Wetland Plants. And then there is some planting surrounding the grass swale. Typically, it's a 2 growing period or 2-year period of success, or a success rate, so 75% over the course of 2 growing seasons or 2 years. And if it doesn't meet that, then things need to be replaced, replanted, an additional grow period. So I would suggest those 2. And then I would just suggest a final report be done by, who is it? I think it was Greg Roy. So a final report from Ducharme Dillis, just that it is within compliance. Once
Okay.
it's completed and gone through that time frame, whichever the commission feels is appropriate.
And you were saying with the siltation barrier,
Yep,
the condition of to have it or to have extras in their stockpile, to have a spare on site?
both.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion anyways. The commission has the ability to pick one or the other or use none.
All right. I am going to attempt this. I
Okay.
do apologize. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the, that we have a -3 determination for the request for determination of applicability for 787 Main Street with the following conditions attached. That when it comes to erosion controls and siltation barriers, that replacements or spares be kept on site in case of emergency. That in regards to the growing plan, that we would like to see a 75% success of the growing plan over the course of 2 growing seasons to be able to be considered complete. And that we request a final report from Ducharme and Dillis upon the completion of work showing us what exactly has been done and what may or may not be outstanding. Do I hear a second?
I second that.
All right. All those in favor, and we'll go around in the same order. Jeff Bryant,
Aye.
Bill Payne,
Aye.
Kip McNamara,
Aye.
Lori Stevenson,
Aye.
and I'm an aye as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. You will receive now the commission just has to provide their electronic signature on the document, at which point when that is complete, I will mail you a hard copy of that document, and at which point you will have that for your files. You can provide a copy to Ducharme Dillis just to show them the conditions that the commission has applied to the determination. And then in 2 growing seasons, we'll talk to you again. Once the silt fence is up, it wouldn't hurt to just give me a call so that I can go out, say, yep, it's been installed, you're all set to start the project. But I know you said there's going to be a little bit of time before that work starts, which is understandable. The RDA is good for a 3-year period, so just ensure that even if you start it later within those 3 years, just ensure that the erosion control is up and that you still have time for that 2-season growing period. I think we're all set with that one.
Okay. I
Thank
see
you.
we have CSX on here. Is that an actual RDA from CSX?
It is.
So am I go ahead.
Yes, you will need to open it.
Okay. So the Bolton Conservation Commission will now open a a request for determination of applicability under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, Section 40, and under the Bolton Wetland Bylaw, Chapter 233, to consider a transportation line maintenance and annual documentation from CSX Industries, I believe. Nope.
So this is-
Concerning their ongoing maintenance of existing utility lines or rights of way.
So about 2 years ago, if not more than that at this point, we received a letter from them. They sent out a courtesy letter to just say, we're continuing our vegetation management plan as usual. Would you like any further information? So a few years ago, the commission stated that they would like to respond to the letter and require them to file a request for determination of applicability. Although this work and they're considered a utility to a certain extent, but still maintaining this work and management plan, they're exempt. But still, again, as a courtesy, they wanted to file with the Conservation Commission to just say, we're still continuing the work. It's the same work. We're stopping 10 feet before any wetland resource areas. There's no change to the wetland locations since their previous delineation in 2015, which is, I believe, right before they had mailed the letter. And here below, did I include the map? I apologize about that. Yes, I did. So in Bolton, we have this small strip of rail line. And as you can see, we have areas where they limit. So they have a 1 year buffer, and then there's a no spray area because it's within 10 feet of a wetland. Additionally, on this side, they have limited treatment. And in this is the area that they'll be treating, this small segment here, in addition to the 1 year. So are there any questions or concerns by the commission at this time?
This is still an active railroad, right? I mean,
Correct.
so it goes through, and that's the only, in between the yellow and the purple line, that's the only place that Bolton is affected. The rest of this is in a different town?
Correct.
Okay.
So just for placement, this is orientation, this is Wattaquatic Hill Road.
Right.
This is Clinton and Berlin and Bolton, of course.
And how close to the wetlands are they in Bolton? Doesn't look like they're close at all.
So they have a wetland delineated here. This is within 10 feet of a wetland. That's why it's yellow, if you look at their legend here. But you're right, there's no area that's on top of a wetland resource area, but this is most likely an isolated land subject to flooding. And I believe it's right along, probably just 10 feet off the rail bed.
I mean, I don't have additional questions at this time. I'd be curious to see your thoughts, Rebecca, if you had strong feelings. Like I said, I know they have a lot of leeway.
Yeah, I don't. It's a short section that runs through Bolton. They are very transparent about what they've used in the past and what they're continuing to use. I have that file in my office. And it was provided last spring to the commission. Additionally, the amount of area that's jurisdictional is minimal in relation to the expanse that runs through Bolton, and I'm really not concerned within the area that's outside of natural heritage endangered species resource areas or potential priority habitat areas. And even still, it's just along the rail line. it's not a significant area beyond it.
Other questions or thoughts from commission members?
They're not using Roundup, are they?
I can send you, if
I-
you're
I'm-
concerned with what they're
I remember
using, I
talking
can
about
send
this.
you the file that they provided last year about what treatments they're doing, but I don't
I don't remember it.
recall.
As long as you have the file, if you want to send it along to me at your convenience, I'd just like to reread it again.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Send that to me also, please.
Yes. I
Thank
will.
Any members of the public hanging out, waiting to ask a question on this?
Nope, it's just us and someone for the next topic.
Right. If people want to review what's in their plans, would you prefer that we continue until the next meeting or close and vote the next meeting? I can go either way.
I think we should probably just close it. That's my opinion. I don't think we're gonna.
All right.
They're gonna do what they're gonna do. It's nice that they told us.
Yes. All right. In that case, I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing for CSX rail lines. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of closing the hearing or the request for determination of applicability, and I'll start with Jeff,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip,
Aye.
Lori,
Aye.
and I'll be an aye as well.
Thank you.
Rebecca, once again, which way do you think this would be as far as a negative determination?
So again, the -3 is with conditions.
Yeah.
-5 is an exempt project. And then -6 is jurisdictional to the bylaw only.
I guess I would lean -5. I'm curious your thoughts, if that would seem to make sense.
If the commission views this as a utility, which I certainly see that it is, then I would say -5 because it's routine maintenance to that utility.
Yeah. Okay. So unless anybody has any strong thoughts, which I'll give you a second for. All right. I'd like to make a motion that we have a -5 determination on the request for determination of applicability for CSX for utility maintenance.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, starting with Jeff,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Kip,
Yep.
Lori,
Aye.
I'll be an aye as well.
Thank you. Okay. So Brian, you don't need to formally open any of the next few. There's just a vote on the 4th item coming up.
Yep.
But so you can just open the discussion however you feel.
Sure. That's right, because we are. All right. So next up, we're going to, the commission will open a discussion regarding an enforcement order on Fox Run. And Rebecca, can you update us on this?
Sure. Fox Run, there was an incident about a year ago now, almost. Actually, the property owner, Mark Peters, I believe, is here as well. Mark?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me? I've never
Yes.
done this before, so.
Yes, we can hear you. So I'm just going to give a brief summary as a reminder to the commission, and then I will open it up to you, okay?
Sure.
All right. So Some time ago, the commission issued an enforcement order associated with basically a purge of a hose that was being used for hydro seeding the area behind Mr. Peters' home or single-family home property. And it seemed they were not aware and did not know there was actually a conservation restriction which extends in general from the riverfront area, or it overlays that riverfront area. So when the Fox Run development was put in, this was the case among the majority of the properties there. It was a conservation restriction over resource area setbacks and resource areas. So not only had the purged material gotten into the brook, there was now grass and clearing of brush within the resource area, which is the riverfront area, also a deeded conservation restriction. And then beyond that, there was some material and disturbance to the BBW, but ever so slightly because it is really channelized within that area, and it is mostly riverfront area. There was some erosion that was caused by this or worsened by this occurrence as well, because the bare ground obviously was susceptible to that. So when I went out, documented everything, documented the extent of the migration of material that was purged into the brook. A lot of it had dissipated. Some of it had been held up because they were required to install silt fence to try and catch some of that material since it was quite fine. They were required to install silt fence up gradient from the stream bed and channel itself to reduce basically the main source of erosion and the migration of material. Then they were required to come up with some sort of a restoration plan. And there was, the cause of all this was work being done by a landscaping company. And they were also included on the enforcement order because they were the individuals on site when when the violation had been reported and I'd been called out on site, they were still there. So we also spoke with them. And I'll let Mark take the reins from here to provide just some updates on some communication issues they've been having. And then during this wonderful planting time that we're having right now, or planting season, we are in a quarantine where it's a little difficult to contract work. So Mark, I'll let you take it from there if you would like.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to, before I launch into my speech here, I just want to, clarify that what happened at the brook, I want you all to understand that was a landscape. I was at work. I had no idea anything about that. So that, I don't want you guys to think that had anything to do with me. But, with that aside, I just want to say that I respect what you folks do in our community. However, when we met last fall, I thought the commission was going to do a site visit. This whole thing is new to me, so I apologize if I lack understanding of the process or I miscommunicate something. I guess I kind of feel like I'm a victim of circumstance here. So if the commission would allow, I'd like to, provide some history. My wife and I, we actually, as much as this is a single family house, which Rebecca pointed out, we actually have a in-law here. So when we built the house, my wife's parents moved in here with us and they've since passed. And so it's a little bit more than a single family home. So anyways, when we moved in 23 years ago, at which time our backyard went to the tree line. Last year, due to our lawn not doing well, we decided to hire a landscape and an irrigation company to redo the lawn we've always had. We've spent several $1,000s to do this work, and we are now confronted with having to spend several $1,000s more to do away with perhaps more than half our backyard. When we moved in 23 years ago, it appears as though all the building and occupancy permits were signed off on. And, you know, we've never extended our yard. I mean, we've just redone the yard we've always had back there. And like I said, we spent a lot of money in irrigation and landscaping to fix what was a poor backyard. And now we've also spent another $1,700 to have it engineered to determine where this supposed conservation restriction is. I know, it just, you know, it's just after 23 years. I mean, it seems to me that when we went to move in, that somebody should have caught that there was a violation of the conservation restriction back then, and it should have been corrected before it was signed over to us from the contractor. And now we're confronted with, like, you know, a tremendous amount of costs that, you know, quite honestly, we don't have. And, you know, I just don't see how we can have a lawn for 23 years and then be told, like, all of a sudden it's going to be taken away from us when it had nothing to do with us to begin with.
With all due respect, there was some, and I understand what you're trying to do is extend your lawn yard as you're improving it, you know, cleaning up the edges. I get it. People maintain their private property. However, you have a conservation restriction document that, whether or not it was provided to you with the sale of the lot or sale of the home, I'm not sure, that's out of my jurisdiction, but it's, you know, your due diligence to research your lot and know what you're buying. Unfortunately, then I provided, I believe it was your wife, with the, or even you potentially, if you were on the email chain as well, with the conservation restriction language and the location of it, so that you can make that judgment on your own and see exactly what we're talking about. We can't.
Well, I mean, I understand the whole thing. It just seems to me that, you know, I mean, the town should have had some responsibility 23 years ago before they, you know, approved the property for occupation, or, you know, held the contractor accountable for it. You know, it's like I'm being held accountable 23 years after the fact for something that somebody else did. Well, and I've already spent a tremendous amount of money. Now I'm confronted with having to spend a tremendous amount of money more by hiring, I don't know, what do you call it? Somebody to restore the property or whatever. And then, you know, when we met last fall, I thought the commission was going to come out and review this, you know, review the property.
So the commission had gotten all my site visit report photos. They were labeled, they're in detail. They show the location for orientation purposes. So they've seen the extent of it. The commission was going to go out on a site visit when we received documentation that established what the restoration work would be, just like any other application moving forward. There was some vegetation that was a little bit more mature than just improving a lawn, not significant, but there was some brush removed. And again, I understand it, but the issue potentially with, again, I wasn't here 23 years ago, so I can't tell you what happened then, but I do know this conservation restriction was under the jurisdiction of an HOA when it first was put in place. Over time, that changed hands back to the town. And over time, it was a few years. So that may have played a role as well. And it may have been the HOA had jurisdiction. They're supposed to enforce these rules as well. And we're not pointing fingers, though. We're trying to address the issue that occurred. We're trying to resolve it, move forward, make sure that that area is stabilized, make sure that it's vegetated, and make sure that there's no adverse impacts to the brook. And whoever is paying for that, or whoever is carrying out that work, if you are holding someone else responsible, that's between you and that individual. The commission has jurisdiction to the, and
well, who would I have to hold
that on the
responsible?
property owner. So if the property owner wishes to, because it was someone else was on site, someone else did it, which I saw the landscaping company there, then that's your right to do that, but that's out of the jurisdiction of the commission. The commission has the ability to enforce it on the property owner.
What's my right? I didn't understand.
I said it becomes a different jurisdiction if you're putting someone else at fault. I have the ability, the commission, under the Conservation Commission's vote, to issue that enforcement order to the property owner. So where the violation is occurring, and then
Right, but
bring
I mean,
attention to the property owner, then the property owner.
Wouldn't the
addresses
commission
it.
own any responsibility back 23 years ago when the property, I mean, I know the electrical inspector has to sign off, the building inspector has to sign
I
off.
can't
There has to be
tell
an
you.
occupancy permit assigned to us,
Yep.
so
With
on
all
and
due
so
respect,
forth.
with all due respect, I can't tell you what happened 23 years ago because I was not here. What I can tell you is the violation that occurred about a year ago.
Well, I mean,
And
is it-
you know, you've been very willing to correspond and update the commission. I asked for a contract to show that this work has been, you know, that you've been doing your due diligence and working towards compliance, which I'm not saying you haven't been, but the commission needs to see some sort of documented proof of that. And then you had requested that you appeal to the commission, and you clarified that, no, I just want to share some history with the commission, which is fine. But I told you the appropriate place to appeal a decision of the commission is at Superior Court, as it states in our bylaws. And if you had an issue with the enforcement order, you could have appealed that within the 10-day period, which you did not. So
Well,
the
I mean,
commission
again,
now. Go ahead.
I mean, again, I don't know this process. I mean, I'm a victim of circumstance. I moved here 23 years ago. This situation was transferred to me 23 years ago. Again, it's like, I mean, is it unreasonable to assume that, you know, whether you were here 23 years ago or not, that, you know, somebody should have picked up on the fact that the property was being transferred to me and everybody signed off on it?
So the issue is not the fact that it was vegetated, the issue is the erosion and the migration of material that went into the brook. And when the lawn was redone, whether or not it's a conservation restriction, which it is, it's a riverfront area. That should have been permitted work. One, it wasn't permitted. Two, it caused significant erosion into the brook. That's what the enforcement order was for. And then upon further research, there's a conservation restriction there too that specifically tells you what you can and can't do. I provided that documentation to you so you could see, can I vegetate it with lawn or can I not? Does it make that specification? That is your burden to prove to the commission. We can't tell you that.
Well, you know,
We saw an area that was bare that has now eroded into the brook, a significant brook channel that is behind your house. So you need to provide that information that was requested under the enforcement order. And then if you feel it's within the parameters of the restoration to say this can be vegetated with lawn, it will stabilize the area, that is your burden to prove. But I've received no contract, no other confirmation of what's being proposed for restoration work. I appreciate that the erosion controls were put out immediately. That was addressed immediately. I hope and I feel that they are still in working, functioning condition to make sure that there's no further migration of material, but it was still unvegetated at the time. We saw no restoration work, no assessment of the brook itself. So that's a completely, whether or not there was even a conservation restriction there, which there was still a recent violation. So 23 years aside, you have a new violation, and it would have been a violation then, it's a violation now. The vegetation of that area is something you can read the conservation restriction language and make that decision yourself, but the other stuff still needs to be addressed.
So you're saying, like, I mean, as you know, we've been very diligent about pursuing a restoration company, but we've had a lot of roadblocks over the winter.
Yep.
And of course, you know, it was the fall that this whole thing came to light. So that's the reason why it's dragged on into the spring.
Yep.
But so you, if I understood you correctly, if the erosion control consists of having grass where it currently is, then that would be an acceptable, you know, a burden of proof that may be acceptable if you know, if the restoration company can meet that burden of proof, is what you're saying.
What I'm saying, so that's, let me clarify that is a small portion of the issue here. You need an assessment done to determine what needs to be restored in total, because it's more than just that area that was unvegetated that was going to be hydroseeded. My comment about hydroseeding and saying, oh, we had this yard, now you're saying we can't have this yard. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you need to reference your conservation restriction document and see if in that document it allows for lawn or grass. If it does, then that you can include within the other restoration measures that you will be taking to restore the bank, to remove any material that's migrated into that stream channel, and any adverse impacts that have occurred in the BBW or the riverfront area. And that's why you need to hire a wetland scientist to do so. So
Right,
as
well,
far as the—
my understanding was that grass was not an acceptable material to be beyond that conservation restriction. In other words, where half my backyard currently, or always has been.
Right, so that's what, when I read the conservation restriction, that's what it says to me. It doesn't say lawn. So you need, and this could have happened last fall too, but that received no other documentation about this. So you need to read the conservation restriction and include with whatever you're going to submit to the commission for the restoration work that, you know, in our conservation restriction, it says XYZ that may allow for lawn, and see what the commission says and if they approve it or not. But we received no documentation of any plan for restoration work, which I appreciate. Now we're in spring, it was over the winter, you can't get anything done during the winter, but you can contract that wetland scientist, or at least have some sort of document, even email correspondence, just saying, you know, we've reached out to so-and-so, we'll be working with them over this time period. We need to see that correspondence, which you have been corresponding regularly, but not with any supplemental documentation.
All right, so, you know, again, I was under the impression in the fall that the commission was gonna come out and visit the site, so I'm guessing that I was under the wrong impression. That's not gonna happen.
I mean, if the commission wants, we can conduct a site visit. I've sent them all the documentation at the time of the violation of everything that I saw, the material in the brook, the erosion, the bare areas. So it's up to the commission if they would like to have an additional site visit. But to my understanding, they were aware of the issue when I sent them all the documentation. And in addition to that, part of the enforcement order was to provide some restoration documentation, which has not been provided now for months.
All right, very good. Well, it was nice to talk to you, Rebecca. I would have liked to hear from some others, but it is what it is. Again, I'm new at this. You know, I guess it was, I kind of wasted everybody's time, and
No, you didn't waste anyone's time.
have to continue to pursue.
Do you want to tell them about the two companies we're going to be calling this week?
No, I mean, it doesn't matter to them, so.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Does the commission want to go out and see the property during this time of year?
I just want to just say one thing. Maybe it would be a good idea just to, take a drive-by, or, if you could.
You can't really see it from the
Get
roadway.
it from the road. So I don't know if Mr. Peters is working from home these days. So maybe we should arrange to just take a quick look before we. I think that's just my opinion. It's up to you, Rebecca. I mean, you did provide. I remember here talking about this last fall, and but if it would make everybody happy.
Well, I don't work from home. I'm generally home by, 4 o'clock. Sometimes I get home 3 o'clock, but, and I'm certainly home on the weekends. So I was home yesterday, as it turned out, because of Patriots Day, but, horse is already out of the barn on that one, so.
Again, if it can be arranged, I would be glad to go out and take a look at it, Rebecca, and
Sure.
it's up to you all. It's just, I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's helpful. I'd go too.
Okay. So I'm not sure if you heard with our first public hearing item, but we are encouraging applicants and representatives to either not be present or from a very far distance be present. We're not allowing more than 2 conservation commissions during a site visit at one time. We're encouraging the conservation commission members to wear masks while on site in the event that they do come in close proximity to someone. And of course, acknowledging and observing all CDC encouraged practices during this time. I will resend the commission the site visit report from the fall so that they have that fresh on their minds. Again, we're not having more than 2 on site at one time, so I will most likely not be out with someone else unless there's a time period where only one member is going out. My question for you, Mark, is do you have any preference of day of the week or time, or would you like to be present during their site visit, or is it just you would like to be notified?
Yeah, I'd prefer to be on site if possible.
Okay.
Day of week doesn't matter to me. I mean, like I said, I'm not here till, roughly 4 o'clock, if that's a possibility. And again, I just want to reiterate, I appreciate what you guys do for our community. It's, it's obviously Bolton's a beautiful town and we want to keep it that way. And, I certainly in all this, I just, I guess I feel like a victim of circumstance. I mean, nobody any disrespect. I'm just trying to, minimize the pain. It's like I'm this is just thrust upon me, and and I had nothing to do with it. So so I guess I'm sort of throwing myself in the mercy of the court. Again, I don't mean any disrespect or anything, but
Yep. So
but
what
yeah.
what I will
That
do is
said, you guys could name the day and I'll be here.
okay, so I will poll the commission via email. They'll respond one by one and let me know their availability. At which point I will get in contact with you, Mark, and request that the commission go out during a specific time and day, and you can either confirm or suggest another time if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. I appreciate that.
Yep, we'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
How do I turn this thing off?
I can kick you out, I think. Hold on.
Thank you.
Yep.
Oh,
Nice to have that power to be able to kick people out, huh, Rebecca?
I don't like saying it that way.
I know.
I've been waiting for.
I've been waiting for it
all
anyway.
night, yeah.
I feel like it's more vicious.
Out of here, buddy. Goodbye.
Okay. So we want to do a site visit to Fox Run.
With you, I'm just
Okay.
saying this. I do think it's probably fair to just take another quick look at what's going on and
I agree.
take 15 minutes of our time, and then they won't feel like he's such a victim of circumstances. I understand. So.
Okay. So let me back up.
Do you want me to open the discussion?
Yes.
Okay. So, well, I guess it's basically just an update. The Bolton Conservation Commission will now hold a discussion regarding an emergency certification for, oh God, Department
DCAM.
of, yeah, DCAM, DCAMM.
Yeah.
But Rebecca can give us an update when she's ready.
I will, just one moment. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. Okay, so for orientation purposes, the DCAM property is the property adjacent to the Taggart parcel, the 43-acre parcel that the town is looking to acquire this year. It is across from the transfer station. It does have an access road, and it has a Conservation Commission parcel between the gate of the access road and the right-of-way of Forbush Mill Road. This is the property that is described as a reservoir or pond. DCAM describes it as a swimming pool. For all intents and purposes, it is a ponded body of water that is held back by an earthen dam that does have overflow structures that, in my summary, you will discover had been blocked. There was some impact from a beaver dam of the emergency outflow for some time. I received a call about a culvert blockage along Forbush Mill Road, which occurred Friday, March 27th, 2020. As the Department of Public Works unblocked the culvert, they reported this to me. They were the ones who called. And so I walked up the access road as following along basically the channel of erosion and to the source, which was in fact the pond. There were 3 seeps occurring along the earthen dam. After some further research between then and now, and speaking to the DCAM representatives, they've talked with me about some of the obligate species around the earthen berm, which is a little unusual. So 2 of the seeps we believe are relatively natural, where the 3rd, which is where the significant amount of water was coming out of and avoiding the emergency overflow, which was blocked by the beaver dam, that was causing the most significant erosion. There were also a few culverts underneath the access road that I did not know even existed that they have since unblocked. And the emergency certification was for the purpose of breaching the beaver dam to allow for flow to occur within the natural channel and to unblock the culverts underneath the access roadway. Additionally, it was to temporarily stabilize the deposits that have occurred from the migrated material that was pushed down from the flow. Additionally, it did deposit into a portion of the conservation property, and that is an area that they are temporarily stabilizing as well. As you can see here, these are the short-term 10-day period temporary solutions, which obviously are over a 30-day period because of the emergency certification that was issued. And it also included that a permanent solution will be required and a notice of intent needs to be filed. And of course, then the commission would hold a public hearing associated with that. For clarity purposes, these are the site visit photos that show the first deposit. This is closest to Forbush Mill Road, but beyond the gate, so still significant ways into the property from the stream along Forbush Mill Road. This is down the access road, again, before they unblock the culverts and return the flow to its natural channel. This is where it exits north off of the road, or east rather, off of the access road down into the BBW. That's where that first deposit photo was. And you just have a flow line, water running along access road. Again, the pond areas to the top of the photo, the bottom is more towards the roadway. Again, that's significant eroded channel. That is the access road, not a stream channel. And here are the seeps. Can you see my mouse on this?
Yes, I can.
Where, I'll do it this way. So here is one of the seeps. This is the major flow from the pond area. Here you can see the chain link fence, the dam structure that is here. There are 2 additional seeps, 1 and 2. There are some skunk cabbage coming up in other obligate species, and that's why we believe that it is more of a natural occurrence than the third. Oops, there's one person calling in. Here are the seeps again. Main seep. This is one of the pieces of infrastructure that is associated with the drainage of that. But again, it's blocked and not clear. It has since been cleared. This is from the first site visit. This was slightly blocked as well. The beaver dam is to the right of the photo. Outflow.
And this is to the east of Forbridge Mill Road, right? I mean, towards Boston as opposed to towards.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And then here's your beaver dam at the emergency outflow. So that's what was causing the significant, or for this area, significant level along with the beaver activity. Outlet. This is facing towards Don Vesta's property and Taggart property, so that opposite side from Forbush Mill Road. The dam structure. That was again before the flow channel was restored. The flow in the channel was restored. Again, just showing the erosion of the access road. The deposit. And then just skunk cabbage, just establishing the wetland resource area. So they have been corresponding regularly. They had a call, they being DCAM, they've reached out to the Office of Dam Safety to assess the earthen dam. They also were on a call with DEP today at our suggestion. So they are certainly taking all the right steps to be ready with a proposal to bring to the commission. They have also contracted work for more of a sort of mid-stage stabilization, including additional erosion control and silt fence measures, and to remove those deposits from the resource areas. So I didn't know if the commission had any questions about this.
What happens if the dam fails?
That is what we're trying to avoid. Something that they had brought up was potentially removing the dam, but they had just brought it up as a potential solution. After speaking with DEP very briefly, they said it's always best to restore a resource area to its original form where necessary or where applicable. So that is something that they're thinking about as well. And I'm sure I'll be hearing from them sometime this week to hear how that call went. But the concern is that if it's not maintained properly, or if with the significant amount of beaver activity that is just there naturally, that it will either overtop or cause a catastrophic failure, which would be, we wouldn't want that to occur because there is one single family home downstream that would be impacted. There's a historic mill structure that would be impacted. The Forbush Mill Fields would be impacted, along with all the culverts along Forbush Mill Road that we already see issues with during significant storms that DPW is working diligently to resolve and replace as needed.
So what are the options that they have right now? Remove the dam?
So right now, what they've mentioned informally is they had the Office of Dam Safety come out. Dam Safety is concerned with the integrity of the earthen dam. So they being DCAM, asked what, if there would be any concerns or immediate thoughts about removal of the dam. And I said, I'd really go for a third party, or that needs to be before the commission. But as long as it's not impacting anything downstream and it's still conserving the resource areas from a regulatory standpoint, it's feasible, but it would take quite a bit of conditioning and phasing to do so, to ensure that there's no downstream impacts.
Is there an option of just leaving that outflow open or maintaining that outflow?
So that's what they're doing now. And it's not, they are also talking about potentially putting in a flow device. They inquired about that as well. So similar to what we have over on Bowers or Fifeshire, where it's a corrugated pipe, just so that the beaver activity can continue, but the water levels remain relatively the same. So they did mention that as well. They also mentioned not installing something, but that's not, they've expressed that that's not financially feasible, and it's not feasible for who they have as personnel maintaining that. So keeping the beaver dam open in that area so that the water can flow through it. And I completely understand, because we did that over on Fifeshire once, and it is quite a bit of work to keep that open every day, if not twice a day. So, but they will, like I said, for a permanent solution, they will be filing with the Conservation Commission. They have kept a line of communications open to ensure that they're remaining transparent, and they're involving the parties they need to as they move forward with different concepts. So does the commission have any questions or concerns you would want me to relay to them as well? Or are we comfortable with what's being expressed already?
I mean, I think you've done a pretty good job explaining it as how it stands and what the thought process is now. I'm not sure that I would have more to offer to that right now, or any really pertinent questions that you haven't already asked.
Okay.
So my view, Rebecca, is what they're doing seems to have minimized the seeps. I'm not saying they're totally gone, but it seems to have worked pretty well.
Yeah.
That's why I was wondering if there's any way where they could work to keep the water level at where it is right now. They're
So that's
3 feet from what it was, 2 feet.
right.
Maybe.
So that was their goal. And they will either be proposing a flow device and strengthening the dam, or a potential removal. So that's what they seem to be going back and forth between. I'm sorry, what?
It's an either or at this point.
That's what they've informally suggested and discussed at this point. I haven't heard anything other than that. But certainly their goal was to allow it to return to a normal water level by breaching that beaver dam, which was expressed in the beginning when this was issued. So if that's able to be maintained through a flow device or something different, that's fine as well. But what they're also looking at is long-term maintenance costs and what would be better for the resources around that area as well. Because this may be, even with the flow device, sometimes it doesn't work as well. They've been given the individual that we use in different areas of conservation properties and over right-of-way or under right-of-way crossings to allow for beaver activity to take place that have been successful. But that would need to be assessed by a contracted party. So they're just basically gathering ideas right now. They've hired a consultant to then analyze and assess which would be the best suit for their maintenance concerns, their funding concerns, and for just long-term impact to those resource areas.
All right. Any other questions right now, currently?
I'm good.
Any members of the public waiting to discuss this at all?
Who is 978-634-2369?
Hi, I called in regarding the Long Hill Road, but I missed that portion.
Ah, yes, okay. And who, I'm just going to rename you on our screen so we know who's in the meeting. Do you mind just giving your name?
Pamela Taylor.
Thank you.
Ms. Taylor, I will say that was actually continued until our next meeting. They kind of gave an initial discussion about the project. And we had some questions. We wanted to get out on site to take a look and have them mark out where things were actually going to be. So they agreed to continue it until our next meeting, May 5th, to give us a chance to go out on site and take a look at what they're proposing physically. So you missed the initial meeting, but nothing was voted on tonight, and it has all been continued until May 5th, if that helps.
So that will be a good time for public comment as well on May 5th, and it will be at 7:15, and it will be via Zoom as well.
Great. I'm so glad to hear that because I do have input.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so is the commission comfortable right now with what DCAM stands, and I will update you with information as I receive it?
Yeah.
I am personally.
Okay.
Me too.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Okay. So updates for the Taggart property. At the Board of Selectmen meeting last Thursday, they confirmed that we have changed the article amount from $650,000 to $550,000 as the property owner and the town administrator and I came to that conclusion regarding the amount. So it is $100,000 less than the original of what we were expecting, or accounting for rather. So right now I'm drafting a land grant. We're still waiting to hear back from the small communities grant for the reimbursement for the appraisal that occurred for the Taggart property. You will you will be seeing outreach information this week, starting this week. Please share it and please spread the word that we're looking to acquire this parcel. It's during a difficult time, understandably, but now more than ever, we're seeing value and used value of our conservation properties. And we're seeing it, we're trying to document that use as well, more so now than ever, which has only proven that use has gone up, even on rainy, snowy days. And while I was out on an authorized walk of the property, I did run into a couple people walking on the property, which I reminded them that it is private property and it is trespassing if they don't have permission. And I know that they don't have permission, but it just goes to show that there is value to this property and people are utilizing it, and it's not currently conserved in that manner. That's the update for that property.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
We had on here to vote to execute the open space deeds for the Tadmore subdivision and 649 Main Street.
Yep.
Did everybody have a chance to see those and read through those this week?
I had a look at the meeting or the minutes. They look fine to me.
Okay. Rebecca,
Yep.
any thoughts on the executing that open space plan? Sorry, my mind's
Sure.
going.
That's okay.
I thought we signed off on that. Isn't that the
We
one?
did.
You said? We did.
So you signed off on only the Main Street because that was voted previously. And this, we had briefly talked about, not voted on the Tadmore parcel. So that is why it's been placed back on the agenda, since the planning board has now been able to draft and iron out details associated with the open space deeds for both of those properties, where we voted to accept it, but we didn't have the actual document yet.
So we simply need to vote to execute the open space agreement for the Tadmore subdivision and 649 Main Street, or one or the other?
You will need to do both, but I would suggest doing it as two. And
Yep.
I apologize not writing it in that way.
It's perfectly fine. Unless there's any other questions or updates on
I have
these,
one point of clarification, sorry.
Please.
It's open space parcel, open space 1 and open space 2. At this time, we are not accepting the open space 3 Tadmore subdivision,
okay,
as they're, I think, reworking, trying to rework a property line.
so it's open space 1 and open space 2 for Tadmore?
Yep. And
Plus
then just the open space for 649.
649. Okay. Any other updates?
Nope.
All right. In that case, I'd like to take a roll call vote. Yay meaning you're in favor of executing the open space deeds for the Tadmore subdivision open space 1 and open space 2 designated areas. Jeff Bryan?
Yes, aye. That would be
All right. Bill Payne?
Aye.
Kip McNamara?
Aye.
Lori Stevenson?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
And
The only thing I'm going to ask after we talk about the next item is that you just reiterate the fact that there was a vote, that I can provide the wet signature for the registry on items that were addressed this evening,
okay.
just so that we have that in the minutes.
Okay. All right, but first, we're going to vote to execute the open space deeds for 649 Main Street.
Yes.
All right, and we'll do that via roll call vote. Once again, Jeff? Oh, maybe not.
That would
Jeff.
be an aye.
All right.
There we go.
Bill Payne?
Aye.
Kip McNamara?
Aye.
Lori Stevenson?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right. Sorry.
So I had reached out to Brian about Bill H4617. which allows, sorry, one moment, I'm going to pull it up for you, which allows the municipalities some flexibility in permitting deadlines and submittals. If you bear with me for one moment, I will pull that up. So the question, Brian asked the question of, well, so in general, you can either, and the planning board has done this already. So I thought that it would be good to bring up and at least allow the commission to digest the information, whether or not they want to make a vote. And that is the planning board, upon this bill that was passed, has determined and voted to not issue any decisions until the close of this stay-at-home order or the issues resulting from COVID-19, at which time the bill allows for an extension of 45 days beyond when that time period closes. So they have, so right now it's May 4th. So it'd be until after May 4th, but then an additional 45 days after May 4th, they have to issue decisions on public hearing items. The question was, is this something the commission would like to adopt as well? Is this something that you can pick and choose, was the question that Brian had asked, and it was a very valid question. So we did seek counsel and their advice on that. And it seems that it's really up to the commission. And I'll let Brian weigh in on that as well, as he had read council's response. And it seems that the commission has the ability to pick and choose which ones they make a decision on, or basically extend the time period where they issue decisions. But it would be beneficial to the commission if they chose one or the other to just remain unanimous and unbiased on all public hearing items. So that's why we wanted to bring it up. I think we've been functioning well, business as usual, but I also know that some projects may require third-party consultants, or potentially work starts and they can't get a certain contractor scheduled. They're still under the order of conditions at that point, but it's really just during the review process, if we were to need any outside party to review it, and just ensuring that we were able to gather all the information before making a decision. So I'll let Brian weigh in.
Yeah, that kind of is where I stood with it. The kind of third path that I was somewhat looking at is because planning board isn't going to be taking up a number of these cases until after quarantine. It seems to me that we could have a policy that says, look, if you're if it needs another board's approval and that board is not even going to hear it until after quarantine, that there's no point in us hearing it. I know some people might want us to get our approvals in first, but sometimes we have to work with planning board. We have to do site visits. We have multiple site visits, especially if it's something that involves planning board. So my thinking now was, as Rebecca said, we seem to be able to handle a lot of the things that have come in front of us so far. I can understand that people want to get working on certain projects, and it's important, especially outdoor projects are ones that can generally go forward. So I'd hate for us to stop hearing applicants. I'd love to be able to just pick and choose and say yes and no, but as council said, and as we thought, that's kind of unfair. It's kind of a one or the other. But I did think if we were to say, look, we won't hear anything if planning board or the other boards aren't willing to take them up, then there's no point in us taking them up right now. That should possibly filter out a lot of the bigger ones and just kind of leave us with the individual asks that we're kind of getting. That's kind of where my thoughts are right now. I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts.
The other thing to think about is we do have the ability to continue until a time and date certain. That time and date certain, like we've done in the past, can be a ways away. And within that, it can be included that, you know, under the circumstances under COVID-19 and some language associated with that contingency. But we do have that ability as well. Additionally, not continuing business as usual can also cause conflicts, like Brian said, with potentially the commission holds up the project, but a lot of the time it's either only our board or Board of Health has already reviewed the plans, they've okayed it, so then it's on to us. There are a few that overlay with planning board, but there aren't many. So we were just interested to see what the rest of the commission and their insights were.
So
See, everybody.
if in fact we go approve something, but it has to get approval by the planning board, but they're not going to do it until 90 days out after the quarantine is lifted, then we probably should stick with what, you know, they're the heavy lifting people, right?
Not necessarily. So we have
So basically, this
mostly,
would give us another 45 days after the quarantine is lifted to get anything done that we couldn't get done while we were in the quarantine.
right,
I don't have a problem.
DEP,
I don't have
the
I don't have a
state
problem
is
with it.
under the same parameters as well. So right now we're talking with other conservation staff and conservation commissioners who don't have staff, with DEP and wetland specific law firms who the MSNCP group brings in to try and iron out how appeal periods work. Because if locally we're not adopting this, which again, I'm fine either way and comfortable with the commission's decisions associated with that, even if the commission issues a decision and DEP still has until the end of the stay-at-home order, or in the circumstances, May 4th, actually, if it's extended beyond May 4th, then it's to that date and 45 days after. So it's sort of a area that needs clarification that we have another call on this week about, but that's the other contingency where there are all different checks and balances. So it's not, if we approve a project, it doesn't go forward without planning board's review if it needs planning board's review. So it just allows for someone to have one step of the way completed if the commission's able to do so. But I just wanted to make the commission aware of this. And it's not something that needs to be voted on tonight. It's best to be voted on as soon as possible, but at the same time, it doesn't need to be voted on at all. So
That was one of my big questions, was when do we need to make an all or nothing decision? It sounds like we don't, which is great. So I guess I would leave with tonight with just everybody put some thought into it and what your thoughts and feelings are, and we can just kind of leave it open for now. Is kind of where I would think to go with it.
The other question I have that relates to this bill, and I did talk to our town clerk and she was comfortable with it. During this time as well, meaning during the emergency state, there has been an allowance made for submittals, for electronic submittals to be accepted we have not voted or adopted that practice. But what the process would be is, instead of mailing the hard copy to my office, the submittal date would be the date that the town clerk receives the electronic file. And they can either copy me on that email or she will send it to me directly. But that associated date and time will be the submittal date and time, which again, I'm comfortable either way. And I'm not sure, I don't think it really directly impacts the commission at this point, other than not having the full scale plans via hard copy. But that may be something that you'd like to think about as well, just as we move forward and as you're thinking about this. Again, something that doesn't necessarily need to be adopted, but something that is an option. I'm comfortable either way though.
Anyone else have thoughts on this before we move on? All right, so if you can put thoughts into it over the next 2 weeks and have strong feelings, let myself or Rebecca know, or save it for the meeting, and it'll be all sorts of fun.
That'd be great.
Rebecca, should I do the? Actually, I can wait. The reminder of our vote for signatures, wet signatures versus auto signatures.
I would do it after the minutes, since I need to authorize the minutes as well.
Why don't we try that first and foremost? Has everybody had a chance to look at our minutes for April? Was it April 7th?
Yep.
And if so, does anybody have any questions, issues, changes to the April 7th meeting minutes as submitted? Excellent. All right. In that case, I would like to make a motion that we approve the minutes for our April 7th, 2020 meeting as submitted.
Second.
All those in favor, Jeff Bryant.
Aye.
Bill.
Aye.
Kip.
Aye.
Lori. Okay, and I'll go with an aye myself.
Wonderful. So next we have an update on, oh no, you have, sorry, your vote. Or not your vote, you're just.
If you want to go through all the updates, I can hit that now. Sure.
Okay. Go ahead.
Why don't you go ahead and I'll do a reminder of this one at the end.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So,
go ahead.
The Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, we are still within the planning grant process. We're looking to have that complete by the end of May so that we can apply for an action grant in this coming round, which they will be putting out a request for proposals soon, which is exciting. We did complete our community resilience building workshop. We will be holding a public listening session the second to last week of May. Currently, we're looking at May 19th. And so that is a Tuesday at 7 p.m. So we would not be having a Conservation Commission meeting that evening. We will be having one on the 5th though, just to clarify. The public listening session will be a presentation of both the matrix and the data that was presented during the community resilience building workshop, which was held last Wednesday. We had 26 people participating, which is great. And they're using our virtual workshop as an example for other communities because it was such a success. So that was very exciting. And thank you to everyone who participated. So we would like to encourage individuals to start spreading the word about the public listening session. A notice will be on the Conservation Commission town website establishing the time and way to log into that presentation if we are not doing it in person, which I feel we will not be. And that's really the update. We do have a climate adaptation page which hosts our updates for the MVP program and other climate adaptation or sustainable practices. So please look on that. We also have added an Explore Outdoors page to the town website, providing some outreach material for families that may be stuck at home and looking for some activities or resources. Our volunteer land steward position is still open, so we are looking for applicants. Please send in your application to the town clerk or myself at the conservation office. For mail, we did receive an ANRAD, but this ANRAD had another order of conditions open on that same parcel from some time ago, so they have been requested to withdraw their submittal and then close out via requesting a certificate of compliance, to which the commission can consider and then be able to consider the ANRAD after that is taken care of. The conservation property updates, we did have a dirt bike riding around on the Rattlesnake Conservation Area, and we just wanted to, the chief of police and I, as we were talking about this issue, wanted to just remind volunteers that if there is a violation on conservation property, to contact the police first. And I also appreciate knowing about this. Unfortunately, I am normally notified first. Sometimes it's on the weekend, and I'm not in the office on weekends or normally checking my email on weekends. So even still, the police officers have jurisdiction over that, including the violations on conservation properties. There was a dirt bike riding around. We were able to follow the tracks of the dirt bike, and the police will be addressing that matter. There have also been signs from the Annie Moore conservation property that have been removed. Again, that was reported to me instead of the police. I have since reported to the police and reminded volunteers that we need to be reporting these issues to the police officers. And I appreciate being notified as well, but we are lucky where I communicate regularly on various issues with all town departments because we are a small town. So I find out about it normally if they're even notified first. So there shouldn't be a concern about any miscommunication there. We also wanted to just remind people to be mindful of the CDC suggested practices, encourage practices in conservation land. The governor has also encouraged that you wear a mask if you are in close contact with people. I would say on our crowded conservation lands, that should be an encouraged practice. Additionally, if the commission would like me to post something along this line at the sign on conservation properties at trailheads, I can do so. Just reminders about trying to keep contact to an absolute minimal of people outside of your family or outside of your home. This does say to keep dogs on leash at all times. What we have currently is just encouraging people to be under direct control of their dogs, and this means to be on leash for some dogs. Just, again, the mischance that there's more of a reason to come in contact with one another just encourages that to stay separate. So if the commission would like me to post something like that, I can do so. This was posted by another town, so I just wanted to share it. And then just, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it probably couldn't hurt. Like I see some of these signs, I'm like, I think people should already know this stuff, but then I realize people don't already know this stuff. So it probably couldn't hurt to just reiterate and hit them over the head with it again and again. So if you do have the opportunity to put up signs like that, it's probably a good thing.
Okay. And then the other item was, we are seeing obviously an increased usage of our properties. We have one area, the lime kiln in particular, that people are climbing still and sliding down the edges. Bob has placed signage to just remind people, like you said, even though you think this is common sense, we just want to make sure people are aware that these are historical structures that we would like to keep intact, but still allow for their appreciation, I guess. Also parking outside of the trailheads, or specifically at Bowers, if you're parking along the roadway and you're blocking access specifically for public safety, that is a violation, and you may be facing whatever enforcement they utilize. I don't have the ability to enforce that, obviously, because it's not on conservation land, it's out of my jurisdiction, but that is a concern on our conservation properties right now. So just encouraging responsible and respectful use of the properties and adjacent lands.
Okay. Any other outstanding issues?
I don't believe so.
All right. All right. In that case, I would like to remind everyone in the public that DEP, under the Wetlands Protection Act, requires a quorum of the board to sign issued documents under the Wetlands Protection Act. They do allow for electronic documents. However, the Registry of Deeds in Worcester at this time was not accepting electronic signatures and needed a wet signature. Therefore, at our last meeting, the committee voted to authorize the conservation agent to provide a wet signature for the registry on the same form below the commissioner's electronic signatures. Additionally, this motion was recorded at the Registry of Deeds to be so that it can be referenced alongside the conservation agent's signature for reference purposes, along with being referenced in the findings of the issued documents.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. All right, that said, unless anybody has any new business, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn the Tuesday, April 21st meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission.
I second.
All those in favor, and we'll start with Jeff Bryan.
Aye.
All right, Bill.
Aye.
Kip.
Aye.
Lori. Oh, Lori wants to keep going, but I'm going to say aye, and I think that officially closes us.
It does.
All right. Thank you very much, Rebecca, and thank you, everybody.